Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. My name is Owen, and my pronouns are he, him, or they, them, and I am this morning's worship associate. If today is your first time with us, we'd love to get to know you. Right after service, you're invited to our welcoming room, which is located at the south entrance. And if you're online, the link to our visitor form is being dropped into the chat right now. You may have noticed that we don't have a paper order of service, but you can use your phone to access a copy by scanning the QR codes that are scattered throughout the building. We gather in worship to find meaning and to live more deeply. Worship creates connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to our better selves, calling us to live with wisdom and compassion. So whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad that you're here. Today, Toby and Elliot, will you come join me? You're going to be lighting the chalice for us. All right, you ready? Okay. We light the chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with words attributed to Kalidasa, a 4th century poet, who wrote in Sanskrit, "Look to this day, for it is the life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and the realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day." Thank you. And now let's say together the words of our mission, which affirm our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. Thank you.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. Hello, Zoom friends. My name is Jen Youngsun, and I have the privilege of serving this congregation as its settled minister. I use the pronouns she and her. Together, we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as safe place. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars. We have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and more love. We have a right to start somewhere and then continue to grow. We have a responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wished for, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. I'm grateful to the poet and justice doula, Mickey Scott Bay Jones, for these words that help us to ground and guide our spiritual work today. This morning, I invite everyone, and I include myself, into this brave space and into a courageous encounter with a subject that arouses very strong response. We started this conversation during the first week in August. And I know a lot of people were still on vacation back then. Still, a good number of you committed to a 6-week workshop designed by the Unitarian Universalist Association around the book called Defund Fear: Safety Without Policing, Prisons, and Punishment by Zach Norris. Owen and I promised back then that we would come back in October to offer reflections from that group and offer some ideas for next steps. So here we are. Come, let us create a brave, love-infused space. Come, let us worship together.
My name is Tina Dio, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm your ministerial intern for this year. And I'm going to invite you into our ritual of joys and sorrows this morning. We are here today to imagine together, to imagine new ways to build up communities of care over communities of fear. One way we build up communities of care is to share our joys and sorrows together. This takes vulnerability and trust. When we create time and space in community to laugh together, to cry together, to lament together, to celebrate, to sing and dance together, we feel heard, seen, supported, and loved. Today, this space to express joys, sorrows, laments, and celebrations is here for you. And this is a space for adults, kids, youth. You all can come up over here to our table. And if you didn't have a chance to come up to the Joys and Sorrows table before worship started, I invite you to come up now. You may write in the book, light a candle, or place a stone in water. And those joining from home can write into the Zoom chat. And during the week, anyone can go to the pastoral care portal on our website to let the ministers or the lay pastoral associates know you need some support. And I invite you over to our Joys and Sorrows table now. So I invite you to get however you are comfortable with your feet on the ground and into this time of meditation and prayer. You may close your eyes if you want. You can keep them open if you so choose, but ground yourself. Some of us today come here tired. Some of us come here today with gratitude. Some of us come here today carrying grief and sadness. Some of us come here today with a joyful heart. Some of us are here today asking the question, when will it be enough, and how many lives have to be lost to finally pass common sense gun control laws in our country after yet again another tragic school shooting? Some of us are coming here with heartbreak of having lost loved ones at the hands of those who are supposed to be protecting us. Some of us have never been in a community where we have felt cared for or protected and are still seeking that community. And maybe it could be here in this church. Some of us imagine a new way forward in building communities that value care over fear, and a lot of us do not know where to start. We hold the tensions of feeling the need to be protected, and yet we realize the systems of policing in our country are rooted in slave patrols. We hold the tension that this system of policing is broken and irreparable, yet we struggle together in the unknown of what true abolition could look like. We cry out together for change. yet we feel like our voices go unheard. We continue to work together in imagining what a community centered around care could actually look like. We dream of the day when mental health care services receive more funding than policing. We dream of the day when teachers are paid six-figure salaries. We dream of the day when healthcare is a right and not a privilege. We dream of the day when housing and food exists for all without barriers. We continue to work towards those dreams as we keep imagining together. Together, we can continue to create a world of possibility for all. And may all our joys, sorrows, celebrations, and laments that have been expressed today in this ritual and those that remain in the silent sanctuary of the heart be heard and held.
In case you didn't know, Art Day is the 20th of every month. The only rule of Art Day is that you have to make art. There is a theme each month. Sometimes it's a concept like birds or springtime. Other times it's a medium, just like painting or diorama, dance, collage. It's meant to encourage imagination and creativity with no judgment. It's a chance to meet new people and connect with old friends. It's a chance to practice imagining a different reality, a different world. Art Day is a holiday that I invented in the year 2000 when I lived in Arcata, California. It was right in the months before my daughter was born, and I was wondering how much fun I was going to be having. Going forward, I was pretty young. It happened because I hosted an art night at my house, and we had so much fun. I suggested, let's do this again next month. So we did. And then we did, and we did, until it was just a part of life for a number of the following years. The events, they grew in size, and we hosted them in public spaces finally, and at homes, and sometimes both at the same time as more and more people participated in it. Although it wasn't the initial purpose, the Art Day gatherings were an opportunity to grow the size and the depth of the community that we had. We had a lot of fun. We got to know each other better. We met each other's friends, and occasionally someone made a decent piece of art, although that's questionable. More connection, a greater sense of belonging, a richer community overall. All of this came from some silly collage sessions. I mean, this is why I bring up Art Day today. We're talking about community and what it means to invent or imagine community. The practice itself was rather silly in its execution. I mean, really, what group of adults would normally be excited to get together to do finger painting? But that wasn't the point. It was a catalyst itself for community development, and it fostered the community's creative imagination. There are many other community projects that have started in similar ways. One person or a few people decide it would be good to do something for themselves and others. Cahoots was actually started in a similar way. It began with one guy driving around in his bread truck helping people. Now, clearly, Cahoots and Art Day are very different. But I feel like there's a kernel that they share that we would do well to remember. All things start small. All things begin in the imagination of someone. My wife Lizzie and I have recently been trying to recognize when we could use our imaginations more often, or at least that's what I like to pretend this is. The idea goes like this. When we start to ask, whose job is it to do, or wouldn't it be great if we have an opportunity to be the person to do it. More than likely, if we're asking these questions, it's our job. Usually it's about the dishes, but sometimes it's something else. And more likely, if we're asking these, we just have to take the first step. If we want to change our world, then this is where it begins, in our individual imaginations and our own personal visions of what could be.
In the announcement slides that Kat put together for this morning, you may have noticed a quote by the Puerto Rican poet Martin Espada. It said, "No change for the good ever happens without it being imagined first, even if that change seems hopeless or impossible in the present." In one of his poems, Espada shows us how to use the power of our collective imaginations to spark change for the good. "This is the year," he writes. "This is the year that shawled refugees deport judges who stare at the floor at their swollen feet as files are stamped with their destination. This is the year that dark-skinned men lynched a century ago return to sip coffee quietly with the apologizing descendants of their executioners. This is the year that the hands pulling tomatoes from the vine uproot the deed to the earth that sprouts that vine." It is our calling, our spiritual work. It is our job, like Owen said, as members of this faith community, to imagine that which seems hopeless or impossible in the present moment. To many of us, the idea of safety without policing, prisons, or punishment seems hopeless and impossible. Many won't even engage in the conversation. Having read about this topic in the Weekly Connections email, I know that some people chose to do something else this Sunday morning. But I am not here to please you. I'm here to travel with you along a path that you already set for yourselves. That path was laid out when you chose this site for the church a decade ago. That path was laid out when you agreed to hang that Black Lives Matter sign, not only inside the building, but also outside. And just a few months before I arrived last summer, you did something that only a couple of hundred UU congregations have been able to do. You voted to add the 8th principle to your bylaws, which affirms and promotes working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. One of those institutions is our system of public safety and criminal justice. That system is rooted in the oppression of the least powerful people in our society, and it always has been this way. Throughout history, people who were seen as unworthy, dangerous, and deviant have been killed, incarcerated, and separated from the larger community. We've had internment camps, jails, poorhouses, asylums. All of these have held the houseless, the poor, the immigrant. And policing has been used to enforce a certain standard of normality in our society, making it illegal or at least very dangerous to be out in public as LGBTQ, Black, brown, indigenous, or mentally or physically different from a standard set by who? By a dominant force, a more powerful force. Maybe some of you remember me talking about the so-called ugly laws from the 1800s that actually made it illegal for people with disabilities to be seen out in public spaces. Now, we can't lay all this at the feet of the police. This is a system that the people created, and though we call it public safety, we, the public, have surrendered our responsibility to care for one another. We have lost our ability to communicate peaceably with our neighbors and our families, so we call the police. We have lost our ability to care for our neighbors who don't have a safe place to sleep, and when we find them on our doorstep, we call the police. We have become frightened of people who live with mental illness, and so we call the police. But the presence of the police, as we have seen over and over and over again, often leads to tragic consequences for our most vulnerable neighbors. Here, in our own faith community, there are those calling for the abolition of policing. And there are those who believe that defunding the police is an over-the-top reaction that is completely unreasonable. And then, of course, the rest are somewhere in between. The reason that I want to listen deeply to those calling for abolition is because I want to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in myself and in our institutions. I want to be accountable to Black lives of Unitarian Universalism. I want to be accountable to the transgender community and people living with disabilities who are always at a higher risk of being injured or killed by law enforcement. I want to be accountable to Barbara Kenny, a member of our church, and her family who experienced firsthand what it's like to have a child murdered by the Springfield police. Martin Espada has a few more stanzas in his poem. This is the year. This is the year that squatters evict the landlords, gazing like admirals from the rail of the roof deck. This is the year that the eyes stinging from the poison that purifies toilets awaken at last to the sight of rooster-loud hillsides. This is the year that police revolvers, stove hot, blister the fingers of raging cops, and nightsticks splinter in their palms. That last one hits me pretty hard. Some of you may know that my spouse is a retired police lieutenant. When he was working the midnight shifts, it was really hard for me to get a good night's sleep. He has devoted 25 years of his life to the city of Portsmouth, Virginia, and he fought to keep raging cops out of the department. I know that the call for abolition is not about individual officers. It's about the whole system that grew out of a desire to maintain the power of white supremacy and the ownership of capital. So why do we have to go all the way to abolition rather than reform, many people will ask? Because, as Audre Lorde reminds us, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Many abolitionists believe that the system is too broken to fix. So what will come in its place? Well, that's up to us. It is up to us. What can we imagine for a community based on care rather than fear? So here's what some of us in the Defund Fear group came up with. We imagine an equitable way of holding people accountable for wrongdoing. We imagine reducing the harm to the environment, eliminating poverty. We imagine a stronger healthcare system, more attention to mental health. We imagine a restorative, transformational justice system. We imagine eliminating racism, patriarchy, and a system of capitalism that keeps the status quo in place. At UUCE, we want to build a multicultural, beloved community. But it's not by marketing that we're going to do this. It's by our actions. So here are some of the ways that you can get involved. First, educate yourself by attending the next Defund Fear discussion group, this one led by our intern, Tina. It'll probably be in February. Another thing that you can do is to join the local chapter of SURGE, Standing Up for Racial Justice. You can also join the church's Challenging Racism group. And if the Challenging Racism group here wants to move further in this issue, here are some more specific ideas. Help to create a people's budget for the city that would represent what a community of care looks like from a city's allocation of financial resources standpoint. We could meet with the leaders of Cahoots, ask them, what are your specific needs? How can we, as a congregation of 375 people, help you? We could consider the ways that we can involve our youth and our children in teaching them care versus fear. We have lots and lots of groups, committees in our church. We can ask each one of them, how are you incorporating the 8th principle in your work? From the birders to the quilters, to the Earth Action people and the Generosity Network, every committee and affinity group can be asking how it can be building a multicultural, beloved community. So, if those are not enough for you, I've got some more actionable ideas. This is from a research project that looked at how to reduce community violence without relying on the police. So, plant trees, increase green space in neighborhoods, create beautiful public spaces, strengthen relationships within our community through programs like Braver Angels that encourage conversations among people who hold different views. Engage and support the youth through job mentoring and educational support. Reduce substance abuse by increasing the number and the access to treatment. Mitigate financial stress through programs that give assistance of food and utility assistance and rent. Reduce the harmful effects of the justice process by supporting Eugene City's community court and the Resolve Youth Restoration Justice Program, formerly known as Teen Court. And finally, we can confront the gun problem by voting yes on Measure 114. There is no lack of good ideas. People have been thinking about this. People have been speaking out about this for hundreds of years. And in Eugene, Springfield, there are people of goodwill everywhere, quietly and persistently caring for one another. I also know that these days, there also seems to be an abundance of cynicism, an abundance of compassion fatigue, despair, anxiety, and fear. And that's why we need this brave space. a space wide enough to hold opposing views and disparate opinions, a community of courageous people who are not afraid of conflict, who can feel a sense of belonging even if their perspective is a minority opinion, because, as one of our Unitarian ancestors reminded us, we need not think alike to love alike. May we continue to amplify voices that fight to be heard. May we keep calling each other to more truth and more love. May we be willing to be confused and imperfect and inarticulate and unresolved. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. May it be ever so. Amen, and blessed be. Remember, we're going to be holding part 2 of our listening circle about indoor masking today, right after the service here in the sanctuary and on Zoom. Let's say together our closing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth or the fire of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now go into this brand new day and this fresh new week, imagining a community where we care for each other by seeing the fullness of each other's humanity. Go in peace, everyone. Go in love.